This video lesson will explore energy, metabolism, and basal metabolic rate, or BMR. First, we need to understand where energy comes from. Energy comes from macronutrients in the diet, which each provide different amounts of energy when metabolized. Carbohydrates provide the least amount of energy per gram at 16 kilojoules. Protein provides slightly more at 17 kilojoules per gram, and lipids provide significantly more at 37 kilojoules per gram. Alcohol is not considered a macronutrient, but it is a provider of energy in the diet at 29 kilojoules per gram. Fat is the most energy-dense nutrient, and therefore diets high in fat will meet daily energy needs faster. So with this in mind, where should our energy come from? The Australian Guide to Healthy Eating and the Australian Dietary Guidelines recommend that carbohydrates make up the bulk of the diet at 45 to 65% of all energy consumed. This is reflected in the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating shown, where the grains food group and the vegetables and fruit groups make up the vast majority of the food in the pie chart. The majority of carbohydrates should come from complex sources, such as whole grains, with simple sugars limited to 10 to 15% of total daily energy intake. Protein, then, should account for 15 to 25% of all energy intake. Another way of calculating this is that between 0.75 and 1 gram of protein should be eaten each day per kilogram of body mass. Finally, lipid intake should be limited to less than 30% of total daily kilojoule intake, with saturated fat being limited to less than 10%. We now need to understand what metabolism is. Metabolism is all the chemical processes that occur in the body to maintain life, and can be further broken down into two other terms: catabolism, processes that break down nutrients and therefore release energy in the form of ATP, and anabolism, which are processes that build up and repair the body. These processes require energy in the form of ATP to occur. We'll now look at the metabolism of the three macronutrients. When carbohydrates are consumed in the diet from foods such as bread, pasta, cereals, fruits and vegetables, and even sugar sources, the first process of digestion is to break them down into their monosaccharide units. The monosaccharides are fructose, glucose, and galactose. Fructose and galactose need to be further converted into glucose in order to enter the bloodstream as the body's fuel source, blood glucose. From here, glucose could be used for two different anabolic processes, either to be taken to the cells for its current energy needs and converted to ATP, or if there is excess glucose available in the bloodstream, this glucose needs to be converted into storage molecules, either glycogen, which can then be stored in the liver, brain, or body tissue, or converted into adipose and fatty tissue. From here, over time, if extra energy is needed and not available in the blood, these stores can be broken down and converted back into glucose in order to supply the body with needed energy. Lipid metabolism occurs first of all by converting lipids into glycerol and fatty acids. These fatty acids are then metabolized in the liver to acetic acid, which is absorbed into the bloodstream. Similarly to carbohydrates, lipids can be used by cells immediately for their various functions such as protecting vital organs, regulating temperature, building cell membranes, supplying energy if required, or the excess can be stored as adipose tissue. Protein metabolism differs slightly in that proteins can't be stored by the body. Protein from food is broken down into peptide chains and then into individual amino acids, which can be used for cellular use, if required, to build and repair body tissues. Protein can also be used for ATP if inadequate glucose or lipids are available. However, any remaining protein which is not needed for immediate use has to be excreted from the body as it can't be stored. Let's look now at energy storage. When food is catabolized or broken down, it may be used immediately or stored, as mentioned in the previous slides. Energy is stored for times when the body requires greater energy output, such as when running a marathon, or times of famine. People such as the Eskimos that live in the North Pole are able to store extra energy in times when energy is available for times when it is not. Such energy storage occurs in cells as glycogen, particularly in the liver and muscle cells, or triglyceride fat in adipose tissue. Whether energy is stored or not depends on the relationship between energy intake and energy expenditure. If more energy is consumed than burned, the body will store excess energy. If energy intake is equal to energy expenditure, then energy needs are in balance and weight stability will occur. On the other hand, weight loss will occur if more energy is burned than consumed, as the body will tap into its energy reserves by way of glycogen or adipose tissue to source the extra energy required. So, how are our energy requirements determined? The body requires energy for maintaining body temperature. This is in the form of heat energy. For brain and nerve cell transmissions in the form of electrical energy. For movement in the form of mechanical energy. For digestion and metabolism in the form of chemical energy. So, metabolism involves releasing the chemical energy available from food and converting it to other useful forms, such as electricity and heat. So how do we make sense of all of these energy values? How much energy do you actually need? An individual's energy needs are determined by the basal metabolic rate, BMR, more about this later, the thermic effect of food, which is the energy used in digestion, and the amount of physical activity and exercise undertaken per day. The basal metabolic rate is the minimum amount of energy used to maintain normal body temperature, maintain muscle tone, keep the heart beating, and keep all vital organs functioning. BMR is slightly different for males than for females. For males, per 1 kilogram of body mass, 1 calorie is burnt per hour each day. For females, every kilogram of body mass burns slightly less at about 0.9 of a calorie per hour per day. To see this in practice, we can calculate the BMR for a 70 kilogram female. Per kilogram, she will burn 0.9 calories for each of the 24 hours in a day. So we can start by multiplying 70 kilograms by 0.9 by 24, which will give us 1,512 calories per day. But in Australia, we don't use calories, we use kilojoules, so we need to use the conversion factor of 4.184 to convert 1,512 to 6,350 kilojoules per day. The process for a male is obviously very similar. However, instead of the factor of 0.9 calories per hour, we use 1.0. Other than BMR, other energy expenditure each day involves the thermic effect of food, which is the energy used to digest, absorb, metabolize, and store nutrients. This is estimated at approximately 10% of total energy intake from food. So, if you took in 9,000 kilojoules of food, 900 of those would be used for the thermic effect in the digestion, absorption, metabolism, and storage. Additionally, energy expenditure for daily physical activity can be estimated from diet and exercise books and charts, and for the purposes of this course, you will be given this information in an exam or test situation. Overall energy calculations, which you would be expected to be able to do, would involve looking at the energy intake of an individual and comparing it to energy expenditure to see what the net effect of the energy balance would be. So for example, a 73 kilogram female consuming 8,500 kilojoules walked for 30 minutes, using 462 kilojoules, and cycled for 60 minutes using 1,344 kilojoules on a particular day. To work out her total energy expenditure, you first need to calculate her BMR, which would be 73 kilograms multiplied by 0.9 multiplied by 24 multiplied by 4.185, which comes out to be 6,598 kilojoules. Make sure you can do this calculation. The thermic effect of food is estimated at 10% of her intake of 8,500 and is therefore 850 kilojoules for this day. The energy that she expended in exercise is the sum total of the 462 kilojoules used walking and the 1,344 used cycling. So her total energy expenditure comes as the sum of those three numbers: BMR, thermic effect, and energy from physical activity and exercise. To work out her total energy balance then, we need to take her energy intake of 8,500 kilojoules and subtract her energy expenditure to find out that she has a negative energy balance of minus 754 kilojoules. A negative energy balance implies that if this pattern were continued over time, this female would lose weight. To recap, energy balance is the difference between total energy intake of all food and beverages consumed and the total energy expenditure from basal metabolic rate, thermic effect of food, and the kilojoule expenditure for various daily activities. It's important to know that certain factors can also affect BMR, making it higher or lower than expected. The first factor we've already considered, which is gender, in that males have a higher BMR than females due to a higher amount of lean muscle tissue. Another factor is body size. A larger body mass will have a higher BMR due to the larger amount of energy required for basic functioning. A higher proportion of lean body tissue compared to body fat will also increase BMR, which is why resistance training and weight-bearing exercise is encouraged in people seeking to increase their metabolic rate, as muscle cells burn more kilojoules per hour than fat cells. Different hormonal conditions can affect BMR, such as is the case in pregnancy. Additionally, infection and illness increase BMR as the immune system is forced to work harder to fight infection. Fasting will actually decrease BMR as the body seeks to conserve energy due to a lowered intake from food. Certain drugs can increase BMR, such as caffeine and nicotine. Cold climate will also increase BMR as the body uses more energy to keep warm. And finally, your BMR decreases with age, and therefore, to maintain in a correct energy balance, energy intake from food also needs to decrease as you get older.